The following program is sponsored by Community Psychiatric Centers and is produced for educational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for medical or psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content should not be used for self-diagnosis or treatment of any health-related condition. As always, seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions regarding a medical or mental health condition.
Welcome to Community Psychiatric Centers Presents. Tonight, Sibling Rivalry. If you have brothers or sisters, you've probably experienced it, and if you have children, you've probably seen it. But when does typical sibling rivalry cross the line and become a serious problem? To help us tackle the topic, let's meet our experts. Dr. John Carasso is Clinical Director of Community Psychiatric Centers. He's a clinical licensed child psychologist and a certified school psychologist. And Dr. Robert Lowenstein is Medical Director of Community Psychiatric Centers. He's a board-certified child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist and a fellow of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Dr. Lowenstein, just how much of a problem can sibling rivalry really be?
Well, sibling rivalry has been present since the dawn of time. When you think of sibling, you always think of the word rivalry to accompany it. Think of the Bible, the trouble that Joseph had with his brothers. It's been with us since the dawn of time, basically. It's usually a concern and a problem for all parents, and they have to meet that throughout the course of their child's lifetime. Sibling rivalry extends not only into childhood and adolescence, but also into adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Carasso, is sibling rivalry a common concern expressed by parents, and when does it really start?
Well, much to the chagrin of parents all over the place, yes, it's a very common experience, and yeah, it's really a struggle. Maybe parents can take some comfort in knowing that they're not alone in their misery. I can fully attest to the fact that even mild forms of sibling bickerings can be quite taxing, no question about that. The severity does tend to vary. Thankfully, in the more extreme cases are rare, which is good news, obviously. And we expect this love-hate thing going on with kids. You know, one moment they're loving and hugging each other and playing together nicely, and those are the good times. And then only moments later, that can change rather abruptly, and there's blocks being thrown and whatnot, and that can obviously be rather taxing. We hope, though, we hope, and typically it is the case, that the kids are getting along more than they're not getting along. When does it begin? It begins typically even before the second child is born, when the competition starts for toys, belongings, and most importantly for the parents' attention. That's really what it's all about.
Dr. Lowenstein, what are some of the reasons why siblings fight?
Well, children in general tend to try to define who they are separate from other people, separate from their siblings. So one of the causes of sibling rivalry is just simply a child trying to identify themselves as being unique from their brothers or sisters. In addition to that, sibling rivalry can come in when there's a birth of a new infant or another child that takes away the attention and affection of their parent or parents. It comes in where there are ages of the children that are quite different. When an older teenager has to look after a younger child and feels as if it's unfair that they're burdened with this when the younger child doesn't have to. It can occur between toddlers who have trouble sharing objects and toys and fight over that. So there are various circumstances that can enhance this problem.
Also, children's temperament can play into it as well, because children obviously have very different manners about them. Some are more high-strung, some are more laid back. That can cause friction. A child who's more laid back may resent a child who is more high-strung getting more attention. And it also plays into children with disabilities. Those siblings of those children with disabilities, that can really be a struggle. Those children, on one hand, they may find it to be very irritating that their sibling is getting so much extra attention because they have to be driven to therapy appointments and receive lots of extra attention because of the disability. By the same token, those siblings feel guilt because they know that their child has disabilities and need the extra attention. And so here at CPC, we provide extra support for siblings for that very thing, because that can be quite distressing and difficult.
Sometimes parents will also identify one or another child with a particular a relative or person that they knew before, and will tend to project onto that child either love or hate feelings, or onto that, and say, well, you're just like my brother who was mean to me, or you're just like my sister who was nice to me, and that tends to set the child up for for some form of unequal attention, which they can resent. Also, there are situations where the families themselves are in conflict, and they themselves haven't learned, as a family unit, how to communicate their needs, how to communicate anger, and how to resolve their various disputes.
So it can actually start with the parents, not necessarily the children bickering.
Yes, parents that are in conflict themselves or have high levels of anger, high levels of arguing, also tend to engender that in their children.
So what impact do parents have in setting the tone for the family, based on what you just said?
Well, obviously it's very important for parents to act as role models for their children, and to be able to communicate to their children what the expectations are for how to resolve conflicts, how to communicate, and how to deal with sibling rivalry feelings.
So, Dr. Carasso, what should parents do then?
Well, we'll talk about many things parents should do, but oftentimes it's a situation of what they shouldn't do. And really, the key is, as much as possible, just try to stay out of it. That really is the key. The key is to try not to step in. We certainly don't want kids thinking that they're going to be somehow rescued. We want them to learn the skills and use those skills to handle these situations independently on their own. We don't want kids feeling as if they're going to be protected. We have to protect, of course, in some situations. But for the most part, we want kids understanding that if I'm going to be obnoxious, I may pay a price for that, and mommy and daddy aren't going to jump in to protect me. So it's vitally important that the parents try to help kids deal with these situations independently.
So let me get this straight. It's better for parents not to get involved, but when they do get involved, what do they need to keep in mind?
Well, firstly, they shouldn't typecast their child. Number two, they shouldn't take sides. They shouldn't punish a child for expressing their feelings. They really need to let the children learn how to negotiate between themselves a solution which is a win-win solution for both sides. Some things that work are, for example, if two children are fighting over a toy, that toy then has a timeout and is taken from both of them. If a child tries to argue that they have to be first on the line to eat, let's say, then that child is asked to be last on the line until they learn that they can't push ahead. Those kinds of techniques often are very helpful in encouraging children to find solutions between themselves.
All right. I'm going to ask you a question based on that when we come back. We're going to take a short break. If you have any questions for our doctors, you can always go onto their website, send them an email, cpcwecare.com, or check out give them a call on their phone number, 1-877-899-6500. We'll be right back.
Have you noticed something different about your child lately? Does your child seem withdrawn, unhappy, depressed, or prone to sudden outbursts? Your child may be suffering from a mood disorder, and it may be time to get help. At Community Psychiatric Centers, Dr. Robert Lowenstein and Dr. John Carasso lead a highly trained professional staff that offers mental health diagnosis, treatment, and therapy to children and adolescents. Call 1-877-899-6500 today for a free phone consultation.
Can you imagine anyone exposing their unborn child to 4,000 chemicals? It happens every time a pregnant woman smokes. In Pittsburgh, more than 23% of expecting mothers light up, making it the worst major city in America for prenatal smoking. Yet the risks are clear. Pregnant smokers are twice as likely to deliver a preterm baby, 3 times more likely to have an infant die of SIDS.
I'm Kimberly Easton. Smoking for 2 is a crisis in Pittsburgh. If you're pregnant and still smoking, you can get help.
Welcome back to Community Psychiatric Centers Presents. We're talking with Dr. Robert Lowenstein and Dr. John Carasso of Community Psychiatric Centers about sibling rivalry tonight. And Dr. Carasso, we talked about the importance of parents staying out of the kids' battles. Tell us more about why that's really so important.
Sure. Keeping in mind, just like with any of us, kids most want power and attention. They really do. And what better way to get that than by aligning themselves with the parents against the sibling? There's no better way to get power and attention than that. So it's important for parents to remove themselves from that alliance. And that really helps to take the wind out of the kids' sails in terms of trying to get that type of attention and trying to feel that type of power. So the idea is to intervene in a way that promotes equality between the two kids without taking sides, as Dr. Lowenstein had mentioned. For example, so little Jimmy approaches mom, crying and complaining, saying that he just got hit in the arm by his older brother Johnny. And so a response may be something like, well, Jimmy, I'm glad you're pretty tough and you can take that. And Johnny, I'm glad that you're able to control yourself and stop before things go too far. And so it's a positive message to both of them. At the same time, it sets limits. And if it continues, there's plenty of things that can be done. For example, divide and conquer, and any number of other strategies that we'll be talking about.
It's interesting because parents would normally, without thinking, probably do the opposite. Side with the child who is being picked on without really knowing.
The typical thing that parents do is side with the younger child. The younger child is being so-called bullied by the older child, and the mistake is to step in and protect the younger child and punish the older child all the time. That really sets up a lot of anger in the older child, basically, and also doesn't teach the younger child how to deal with problems in the family. The kinds of things would need to be set up. The parents need to set up rules, such as during arguments, you can't call each other names, you can't tattle on each other. If a child is being punished, you can't use that as a weapon against them and make fun of them because they're being punished. The other things is help them to take timeouts from each other, cooling off periods, coming back and then talking about how they feel. Those kinds of things are very helpful in helping children to resolve conflicts. The other thing that's very helpful is to set some private time with each child as often as possible. 10 or 15 minutes of quality time per day with each child can go a long way in helping to give the child a sense that they're being listened to, that they're important, separate from their siblings. Give them an opportunity to express their feelings about their siblings as well and not be critical about those feelings. That kind of private time is very important for the child, and they should all be afforded it.
Dr. Carasso, what are some of the other things that parents can do to help their kids get along?
Sure. It'd be important to allow kids their own time and their own space with their own stuff, to play with it and do so unencumbered by their pestering little brother or sister, or vice versa for that matter. It's also important, we talked a few weeks ago about having family fun time and family together time, and that's important in this matter as well. It helps to give the family, the kids, attention that they want and need as a group. And so it still satisfies that attention need. Also, if there is a coveted item that they especially like, say a video game or something, and they fight over it typically, well, it could be scheduled for a certain time for each child so that they know that during this period of time, they're in charge of this item and they can play with it as they see fit. And that sometimes helps to reduce the bickerings as well.
Dr. Lowenstein, any final thoughts from you about trying to have kids get along?
Well, I would say if kids are arguing about certain things, then you give each of them the opportunity to get something that they particularly want. So they may choose to sit in the bucket seat of the car while somebody else gets to choose where they go in the movie, while somebody else chooses what they eat, whatever it is. Each child gets their chance at having something that they want. And it's important that the parents also discuss with each other what the rules will be in terms of setting up how fights will be resolved within the family. Family meetings are extremely important to doing this.
Dr. Carasso, when is it time for parents to get professional help? Because can this be a lifelong problem? I mean, what happens in childhood, can this carry over for decades?
And it can carry on for a long period of time as well. It just be very severe. Even if it's short term, if it starts getting in the way of family functioning chronically, severely, where it's really difficult to get things accomplished because there's so much bickering going on, if it starts to get in the way of the marriage, which is not uncommon, by the way, these types of challenges, if kids are actually getting hurt, or if there's really concern that somebody at some point is going to really get hurt here, that too reflects the need for intervention. If the name calling and the bickering and the things that are going on are really starting to hurt one of the children's self-esteem, and they're really starting to show, that too results in a need for intervention. And of course, again, give us a call, free consultation. We can discuss these matters at length.
And parents do need, however, to step in if a child is at risk of harm.
Absolutely.
I mean, if an older child is about to really harm a younger child, or vice versa, that's time to step in and stop it from happening. And if it's getting to the point where a child is really getting physically assaulted, attention needs to be given professionally to that family.
It's a balancing act. It really is between wanting, again, our advice was to not intervene as much as possible. At the same time, though, you do have to teach, and you have to protect. And understanding those lines can be a challenge, and that's why we're here to talk about those things.
That sounds like a bit of a tightrope.
It does.
To know when to jump in or to know when to get help.
Exactly.
All right. When we come back, we'll take a look at some research in the news right after this. You're watching Community Psychiatric Centers Presents on PCNC.
Every parent has sweet dreams for their baby, but what happens when the unexpected happens? When a child develops slowly, has trouble talking, or withdraws into a world all by himself? Today in America, an estimated 1 in every 150 children is diagnosed with autism. And while there is no known cause and no known cure, an early diagnosis can make a major difference in an autistic child's life. At Community Psychiatric Centers, Dr. John Carasso and Dr. Robert Lowenstein have more than 50 combined years of experience diagnosing and treating many thousands of children and adolescents with autism spectrum disorders. They, along with their highly trained professional and caring staff, can evaluate, diagnose, and treat children and adolescents who may be having problems at home, in the community, or at school. If you believe your child needs help, call 1-877-899-6500 for an evaluation at one of our 11 convenient locations in southwestern Pennsylvania. Community Psychiatric Centers, connecting you, your community, your world, one family at a time.
Welcome back to Community Psychiatric Centers Presents. We're talking with Dr. John Carasso and Dr. Robert Lowenstein of Community Psychiatric Centers. We're turning now, we were talking about sibling rivalry. We're going to turn to a lot of the research that's in the news. And Dr. Lowenstein, here is a topic for you. Affective Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder treatment found for children with Fragile X syndrome.
Right. The Fragile X syndrome is one of the most common forms causes for the mental retardation in children. In the past, these children have also been diagnosed comorbidly as having ADHD with hyperactivity and impulsivity. In the past, these children have been treated with the stimulants with not great success. They get very irritable, excitable, and impulsive on it, and also have abdominal cramping. There's studies have been done out of Rome that now show that treatment with a medication called L-acetylcarnitine, which is an amino acid, has been shown to be effective in treating ADHD symptoms in children with Fragile X syndrome. First time it's been tried, seems to be effective, and it's something to be observed for the future. A very nice study.
All right, here's another one for you. Internet predators target teens, not kids. That kind of flies in the face of a lot of things we've thought.
It does. The usual thought is that predators tend to target younger children on the internet because of their age. But studies have shown that, in fact, predators tend to target teenagers rather than younger children, tend to establish a relationship with them, tend to then draw them into a relationship with them, become sexual and abusive. So this is not surprising, but clearly is somewhat alarming in that these teenagers who are involved in this often have past histories themselves of emotional problems, past abuse and problems getting along with their families.
Which is not to say leave your little kids alone on the internet because there's no danger, because there is.
But there's a greater danger for your teenager.
All right. Dr. Crosso, new method tracks psychotherapy effectiveness.
Yes. There's a recent article in the American Psychologist documenting a new published device that helps to track whether or not counseling for any given client is effective. And in reading the article, a few things came to mind. First off was that it's something that we've been doing at CPC all along. It really emphasizes the importance of that whenever a child is in therapy, that there is what's called data collection that goes along with the therapeutic process. What that entails is determining very specific goals and objectives to work on with this child, and tracking how that's going to be determined, whether or not we're reaching those goals or objectives. And so that entails breaking down the behaviors into small elements and determining whether or not we're meeting those goals. For example, if we're working on aggression, well, of course we're going to target how often is a child being aggressive and document that and make sure we keep track of that. What I want to emphasize is the importance of that's not happening in a counseling experience, and that's a significant problem, and it's something that we do as a matter of course as CPC, because it's so integral in the counseling process, and without it, it's difficult to even determine whether or not we're making any progress. And so again, even though this is happening, it's touted as a new device. Again, this is old school. This is something that's been going on for a long time in CPC, and it's vital to the counseling process.
All right, Dr. Lowenstein, this is an interesting one. Hopelessness may continue as depression improves.
Yes, this is very important. There's a study that just was published in the Journal of General Hospital Psychiatry, which basically purports that they did a study of teenagers who were treated with antidepressants, a variety of different antidepressants for depression. And they found that while the teenagers' depression seemed to lift after several weeks to several months of time, their feelings of hopelessness were delayed in being improved, and they continued to feel hopeless despite the presence of improved depression, which is a little scary because it means that while they are now a little bit less depressed, have more energy, more ability to act on their impulses, still feel hopeless, it tends to raise the risk of suicidal behavior. And this may be something that really needs to be watched very carefully.
So does that mean that the therapy should definitely continue?
Yes.
Because this could be happening.
Well, not only therapy, but the children need to be monitored very closely over a period of time to make sure that their hopelessness also improves.
All right. Dr. Carasso, why you just can't say no in the heat of the moment?
Yes, okay.
Sounds simple.
Well, interesting stuff. This is out of the Journal of Behavioral Decision Making. So it's a new book by MIT behavioral economist Dan Ariely. What it talks about is that when we are in the heat of the moment, whether that be through emotion that's sexually charged or having to do with anger and aggression, that we don't make good decisions. Okay, now it seems like a no-brainer, of course, but what this research focuses on is that during those times of heated emotion, we make poor decisions, but we tend to overestimate our ability in those situations. When we think ahead, we think, well, I can handle that, and I'll be able to make a good decision, but actually we don't make very good decisions during those times. Well, this relates to a show we did a few weeks ago on teen pregnancy, where we talked about how teenagers will make abstinence pledges that they're going to abstain, and then they don't. Half of them don't make it. Well, what this suggests is that they may have good intentions, that they don't want to fail in that respect, but what they need is they need help from adults to supervise them during these difficult times, to make sure that they're not put in situations that are compromising and difficult for them. So we need to make sure that kids are being monitored and chaperoned during parties and whatnot. We need to make sure that they are involved in group dating. We want to make sure that they're not upstairs in their bedroom doing homework alone with their girlfriend or boyfriend, that type of thing. Because in those situations, clearly, they don't make good decisions, and then you end up with a teenager who's pregnant.
They have less impulse control than adults.
Well, the fact is that this research focused on adults as well. In fact, adults, even in situations, well, the answer is yes, of course. One would hope that adults have more self-control than teenagers do. But the fact is that this this research also carried over for adults as well, and that in the heat of the emotion, none of us make very good decisions.
All right, and last question to Dr. Lowenstein. The FDA is saying to drug companies off-label use is okay. In what respect?
Well, the Wall Street Journal just published an article called Boost for Off-Label Drug Use, in which the FDA is proposing to basically inform doctors about the off-label use of medications, meaning the use of medications for purposes that were not originally approved and studied. In psychiatry, we tend to use off-label medications in probably a third of the time, so that it means that the FDA may be encouraging physicians to use more off-label drugs. The problem with that is that these drugs have not been completely studied for that usefulness. The clinical research is incomplete, and so the drug companies while they may profit in the fact that their medication will be more used, they're possibly used in ways that are not fully studied.
All right. We'll be back with some final questions for our doctors right after this. There'll be some of your email questions. Remember, if you would like to email the doctors, cpcwecare.com.
As a parent, you want your child to reach his or her full potential. For children with autism, early detection and treatment can make a world of difference in your child's life. At Community Psychiatric Centers, our autism unit is led by two highly trained and experienced mental health professionals, Dr. Robert Lowenstein and Dr. John Carasso. Their expertise in the field of autism spectrum disorders means you and your child will get individualized help you need every step of the way. Community Psychiatric Centers, connecting you, your community, your world, one family at a time.
This is the true story of high school teacher Stuart Snodgrass, a good guy who became a bad guy.
Beetle Boy, if you can hear me, your city needs you.
When little Michael told the Make-A-Wish Foundation he wanted to be a superhero, Stuart volunteered to be the evil archenemy. We all have the power to help children with life-threatening conditions. We all have the power to grant a wish. Start your journey with Destination Joy at wish.org.tv.
Welcome back to Community Psychiatric Centers Presents. A few final questions for our doctors from the email bag. My kids fight all the time. My 14-year-old is always hitting my 9-year-old. I put him in timeout, but it does not seem to help. What can I do?
Well, the answer is if one child is hurting another child, it's a serious situation. You can try giving the older child, you can try talking to the other child, you can try separating them, talking about the rules that we talked about before, no fighting, no hitting, that kind of thing. If that doesn't work, you absolutely need to get some professional help, because that older child then is overstepping the bounds of what's expected and what's acceptable.
Something that we'll talk with them about is the idea of trying to determine, is mom taking sides too much? That really could be a concern, and that could fuel the fire.
All right, here's another email question. I watched your show about kids and lying. I really liked the show and found it to be very informative and helpful. I do have a question. What should I tell my child about those quote-unquote white lies you mentioned?
It's a good question. Well, the idea, a few thoughts on that. One would be, is with young children, the whole concept of white lies and more serious lies, it's kind of lost on them. They have a hard time understanding that. We want to model truth-telling. We want to model. There's plenty of ways to avoid white lies. There's plenty of ways to tell somebody how you feel without hurting their feelings. There's plenty of ways of doing that. And we want to communicate that with children, that there's ways of telling the truth and being sensitive and learning how to do that and practicing and role-playing that and also modeling that for them.
All right, doctors, as always, thank you for being with us, and thank you for joining us this evening. Remember, if you have a question for the doctors, you can call and talk to them. Free phone consultation at 877-899-6500. See you next week. Good night.